Hey, class, I just wanted to take a minute to talk to you guys about some of the key takeaways from the ideation phase of design thinking. Um, this is just some of my notes and things that I've picked up through this process, and I wanted to kind of share that with you guys. So the very first thing that we want to talk about here is how do we prepare for the ideation phase, right? Once we have our good problem statement and we've managed to focus on the users and empathize with them, how do we prepare for the ideation phase? And the questions I kind of want to ask here is, do we have the right tools that we need? Do we have the right information? Um, how are we going to make this ideation phase happen, right? Whether that's a notebook and pencil or a digital board or a whiteboard or sticky notes or an Excel sheet. How do you have what you need to be able to communicate with your team um, that is helping you with this ideation process, or even in your own ideation process, right? Um, are you going to be doing brain walking? Are you doing brainstorming? Are you doing well, what is it that we're doing here in this process? So, do we have the right tools that we need for this? Um, the next step that I like to break this into is the incubate and illuminate step, right? So, once we have a tool and we have the way we're going to approach this, this is where we start adding ideas to the ideation space. And one of the things I like to do in this section is to reframe the question um, from can we do this to how do we do this, right? There are limitations that we've got to face in the process, right? Time, money, resources, those kinds of things, right? But as I tell my students, anything is possible with that combination, the right amount of time, the right amount of resources, and the right amount of money. But you have to have all three. And then you have to set the priority on that, right? You have to be able to say that this is the thing that we're going to spend that time, that resources, and that money on. Um, you also need to stop and think in this incubate, illuminate stage about the ideas. There's no bad idea here. We want the convergent and divergent ideas because both of those will lead us to the innovative solution that we're looking for. Um, again, back to the resources and time and money. Anything is possible. You want to build the transporter from Star Trek? You can do that if you got the right time, money, and resources. But really, is that the priority of what you should be working on? Um, and do other things outrank that? Which brings us into our next section here, which is a little bit more of that analytical piece of this, right? So we're going to evaluate all the ideas, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything that was put out on the board in our ideation phase. You know, um, do we have what we need? And we take a closer look, right? The three things that I like to look at here are the value add, the plausibility, and the impacts, right? So with value add, can we achieve the results that we want? Does this idea actually achieve the result that we want? Um, are there any additional positive results that we get from this, right? So there may be things that we come up with in the ideation phase that give us additional bonus ads that kind of make it more appealing and more attractive, right? Are the stakeholders in favor of this? The huge thing with this is that throughout this whole process, we need to ensure that whoever we're working with, whoever we're designing for, is excited about and invested in what we're doing. So, is there a value add? Are the stakeholders invested? Are there additional positives? Does it do what we want it to do? Um, the next thing we want to take a look at is the plausibility. Again, we're phrasing this with the how could we do this? What's the cost, physical and resources, right? This is where we're starting to lay out. Here's the time, the money, and the energy. or the resources needed to do that, right? Before everything went on the board, regardless of the limitations. Now at plausibility, we're looking at, can we do this? What's the cost? What's the resources? What's the time? Um, and is this something that the stakeholders are truly excited about? If it is something that they're truly, truly excited about, maybe, we can borrow a little bit. We can change it a little bit to make it more plausible to meet that expectation from the stakeholder. And are there any trade-offs, right? And this is kind of where I was going with that, with the trade-offs on, like, can I take this idea that the stakeholders are really, really, really excited about, and fit it within the constraints of what we've got for this project? Can I take a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, and make it to where this is going to do what they want it to do? And then the impact, right? And this is a little bit different than the value add in the fact that, what are all the possible outcomes, right? I'm not just focusing on, hey, are there positive outcomes, additional positive outcomes, but what are some of the negative outcomes? How can this affect others? If I make this change, and this happens a lot in the IT world right now, make a change in system A, and department B has a process that reads off of system A that we didn't know about, and we make the change, and now their data is not correct in their system, and we've broken something, right? How is this going to affect the accounting department? How is this going to affect the marketing department? Are there additional resources that we're going to have to engage? Do they have the bandwidth for it? Are the stakeholders willing to set the priority for this above what's currently on the plate, or above anything else that's coming up on the timeline, to make sure that this item gets complete, and make sure that the stakeholders are willing to set this priority, even knowing the impacts to the other units, or the other departments, as far as we can see, right? Uh, and remember, we should get feedback continuously throughout this process. If we're not talking to the community we're reviewing this for, then it's not gonna work in the ideation, right? Which brings us to our timeline. This is a really cool graphic. The link is listed below this graphic that I found out on the line. And I really like this graphic because it shows how this is a continuous improvement process, and how, throughout the entire design thinking process, that things can kind of refine and circle back on each other. I'm going to talk specifically about the ideations part of this, right? So as we ideate through, and we get into prototyping, we may learn that there's something new that comes out of that prototype that we didn't think about, or we learned something that, hey, it doesn't quite do what we wanted it to do, even though we thought it would, right? It requires us to come back to this ideation phase and start this process again. Or maybe we get through the prototyping phase and we're actually into the testing phase of things, and we get end user tester feedback, or we see additional problems, or new ideas about, this. Or again, maybe it doesn't function the way the testers envisioned it to function, even though the prototype is designed, and functions as designed, right? So all that can lead us back into this ideation phase, where we have to come back and rethink what we're doing, and go back to those tools and those boards, right? And the last thing I want to kind of push forth through here is the practice. We need to put this into practice. So your next step is to read the case study idea. The link is here for you, as well as in D2L. And when you click this link, you'll be able to go out to the Padlet. There's a second YouTube video out here about how to use, the popular Me site and the Padlet for the case study. Please review that. And if you have any questions whatsoever about the case study or any of these materials, please feel free to post in the D2L discussion board, which will be linked off the Padlet and is also linked in D2L. And we look forward to working with you guys.